more and more companies are getting hacked. But what does it actually mean to get hacked? That's what this video is about. There are production outages, data leaks, or any kind of damage to computer systems caused by hacking. But what exactly are the actions that attackers carry out so that we say a company has been hacked? And what are the consequences for me as a company? In general, being hacked means that an attacker or an unauthorized person had access to my systems. Access can also mean that they copied data. A special case can also be that the data was encrypted so that I, as a company, can no longer read or use it. Or data was simply copied, meaning it was extracted, resold, or I could be blackmailed with it. For example, my data could be exposed, customer data, or whatever it may be. Who are these actors, the hackers, so to speak, if you call them that? Who is behind it? It can be different groups. So on the one hand, of course, there are criminals who are mainly interested in our personal wealth. That means they want to sell this data for money. They want to blackmail the company they hacked, and in this way, yes, a criminal organization that makes money from it. Other actors could be of a governmental nature. Especially in the field of warfare, it can also happen that, for example, companies that manufacture war machinery are hacked in order to create a bottleneck there. Or, for another example, there are individuals known as hacktivists who are driven by deep-seated political or social motivations and do not do it for financial gain, but simply to openly demonstrate and express their own personal convictions. For example, what could you say if you are against a particular lobby or a specific industry? Then as a hacktivist, you could specifically target associations or companies from that lobby and attack them accordingly. And as a final point, there are also employees or former employees who say, I was so dissatisfied with my experience at this company and they harmed me so much or whatever that I want to take revenge. So accordingly, there is also an attack vector from this person. So how does such a hacker attack actually take place? Usually there is a specific point of entry. So there are probably several attack paths, but the most common ones are, for example, that the data I have as a company is stored on an external server somewhere where I then have access, for example, with a password. If I somehow obtain this password, whether through social engineering, through phishing attacks, for example, I pretend to be a business partner, say that I need to quickly prepare my data for the next presentation, corporate presentation or something like that, and then it could happen that I gain access accordingly. Once I have access to a system, as a hacker, I would probably start by exploring this access. That means what is possible with it? Which other systems can I access with it? Which data is accessible to me there? Or I could also try to gain access to additional user accounts that have more extensive privileges. For example, these admin accounts with which I have greater potential to cause damage, access to more data that I can copy, or I can cause more harm by sabotaging these systems. And as the final point, he carries out the actual data extraction. That means the more actions I perform beforehand as an attacker, the higher the risk, of course, of being detected. So afterwards, once I know exactly what my target looks like, which data is located where, I would then proceed with the data extraction accordingly and make sure that it happens as quickly as possible in order not to get caught. And in the course of this, for example, to also install encryption or a ransomware Trojan so that the company that was hacked has a harder time restoring its services, and also in clarifying which attacker, for example, was behind it. What then happens to this data? So with the stolen data that a hacker may have downloaded. First of all, they could, of course, be sold. That means the hacker profits personally from it. They can also be used for further fraud attacks, that is for fraudulent purposes. For example, if I have these phishing emails, which are still very common, then I could, for instance, enrich them with additional information so that I could pretend to be a business partner and even mention specific order numbers that are valid, that actually correspond to reality. Of course, that increases my credibility compared to just writing an email without this data, and it also makes phishing much more successful. And this doesn't just apply to the company itself, where I might have already hacked in, but also, for example, to suppliers who have had contact with this company. The consequences for companies are, of course, that the service I offer might no longer be available. I suffer a loss of trust from my business partners, and yes, I could, of course, also face penalties. So if this hack becomes known and or if I'm required to report it, then it is possible that legal penalties could be imposed on me as a company. So what can I do about it now? How can I protect myself? So in principle, a user should only have the access rights they need. This is the so-called need-to-know principle. That means even if an account is taken over by an attacker, they can't quickly access additional system resources, other servers, or other services. Furthermore, always use a secure password. It may sound trivial, but it's still the #1 entry point. That means an insecure password naturally makes it easier to get hacked. Yes, so even if I don't use phishing, but instead, for example, just try out a password as an attacker, then of course, it's always better to have a password that's as complex and secure as possible, or even better, to use two-factor authentication. As a third point, you can always say, pay attention to systems that you manage yourself. So if I have my own servers that might also be accessible from the internet, or if I have employee laptops that aren't always protected behind a company network but are basically also available on the internet, then I should always install the latest updates for all the services I use on those devices and also make backups of my important data. That means making regular backups, testing them as well, so that if something does happen, the recovery time is as short as possible and I can return to normal operations as quickly as possible after a hack. And as a final point, of course, you can say that training employees is important so that they are able to recognize a phishing email, also supported by technical tools that my email program or my email service provider might offer, so that phishing is already detected and registered there, and this attack vector is minimized as well. In the end, it can be said that the best approach is to set up an ISMS, that is, a holistic information security management system. We also have more videos on this topic, and one of our products is the self-made ISMS, which makes it easy to implement such a system yourself. For more videos like this, feel free to subscribe to the channel.